it's Crystal. I'm in my kitchen today and I'm going to be making another water bath canning recipe. It is a tomato soup using up our tomatoes that we've been growing in our garden. We haven't gotten a whole bunch yet at this point. It's early on in September. Got a ton of them that are green and growing out there. We haven't really been getting in large harvests. I have a collection of different kinds of tomatoes. I've got red ones, yellow ones, cherry slicing, some Romas in there, paste tomatoes. I have a whole bunch of different ones and I'm going to just be turning them into a tomato soup. And I've also got some peppers from our garden and garlic and then onion from the store. And then there's some other things. So this is a very basic water bath canning recipe. I will have all of the timestamps down in the description of the video. So if there's a section that you are looking for, like putting lids on jars or water bath canning times, then you can just go down to that section in the description of the video, click on the timestamp, and it will bring you right to that part. And you don't have to stay around for the whole video if you don't want to, but I hope you do. I'd appreciate it. Now I'm going to talk about the supplies that I'm using. I have a canning funnel. I just got these new ones. They're metal. I haven't tried them yet. We'll see if I like them. And a ladle. And then I've also got this bubble tool. This is to, especially when you're canning chunky things, it gets the bubbles out and also measures head space. So that's the distance between the contents of the jar and the lid of the jar. Recipes have different head spaces that they require, and this helps you measure what the head space is. A pair of jar lifters. This helps you move the jars around, especially in hot situations so you don't burn yourself. The jars I am using today, the recipe says that it makes 4 quart-sized jars. I'm using pint-sized jars because I don't need a quart of soup every time. I just want to have pint-sized jars. So I'm using wide mouth pint-sized jars, and normally for soups and things, something that you pour, I would normally just use a regular mouth jar, which if you don't know, looks like this. It's got some shoulders to it and it has a smaller lid. But I'm going to be using the wide mouth ones, and the reason is because I have low shelves and these fit really nicely in the shelves that I have. The regular mouth ones are just a little bit taller. And because of that, when I go to slide them where I have space in my pantry right now, it's just hitting. Like, I just canned up peach salsa using the regular mouth jars, and I regret using regular mouth jars because I can't fit them in nicely to store them, so they're kind of like on the outside right now. These ones will fit nicely in the shelf. They're a little bit lower. So that's why I'm using those jars. Lids and bands come in 2 different sizes. There's wide mouth and regular mouth. And I am using wide mouth jars, so I need wide mouth lids. And to go with that, I need wide mouth bands or rings. And they just sit over the top of the jar like that. It all fits together. I buy them as boxed refills, and then because I have so many rings and bands left over from years of doing this that I don't need to really replace those, although I do have replacement ones down there. Now, in regards to the lids, a lot of people just take them right out of the box and use them like that. For a while, we used to have to boil lids, and we do not need to do that anymore because most processing times for water bath canning are more than 10 minutes. They do not need to be sterilized before using them because the thought process is that everything will be sterilized when it goes through the canning process. I am just the type of person that usually washes new things when I get them, so I don't boil them, but I do rinse them with some soapy water. Hey, you! I use this free and clear bottle dish soap. It doesn't leave any residue or anything. I just do 1 pump of that and some hot water from the tap. And I just let those sit off to the side for a little bit before I rinse them, and then they'll be ready to use when I get to that step. Like I said, you do not need to do that. That is just something I do. It's a personal preference, but it's not a requirement to wash the lids before you use them. I have all of these jars here that I leave out up in my kitchen. I have a kitchen cart here that has all my canning supplies on it. I store all of the canning supplies down in my basement, and I have so much of it that there's no way I would be able to store it upstairs. So I use this little cart here and have it, all the jars washed, ready to go. I try and keep a variety of different sizes up here. If I know I'm going to be canning something where I'm gonna need the larger jars, then I'll be sure to bring them up like the night before and run them through the dishwasher so that they're nice and clean. So that is that for those things. And then as far as the canner goes, I have the electric water bath canner here. I've already got water in it, already turned up the heat on it so that the water warms up a little. I realize most people probably don't have this, that you're using a standard water bath canner that's on the stove. You can use a stock pot if you don't have a water bath canner. So I've got an electric water bath canner here. I've had it for a few years, I think, and I really like it. It frees up a lot of space off of my stove. I have a gas range when I use my traditional water bath canner on the stove. Because it's over an open flame, it just requires like a little bit more attention. And with the electric water bath canner, I'm able to just kind of set it, and I still need to watch it, but I don't have to babysit it as much. So I really do like that. They sell the traditional water bath canners like at Walmart and stuff, and those are good because they come with a wire rack on the bottom and the supplies that you would need, and they fit more jars than if you were just to use a regular stock pot. You can use a regular stock pot. I have a large one down there, but you just have to make sure that you have some sort of rack on the bottom. I've seen people make racks out of tin foil or just using a dish rag into the water so that the jars don't make direct contact with the bottom of the pot. Wherever the heat source is. Any drastic changes in temperature for these canning jars can cause them to crack or break. And after all the hassle of making and canning and everything, you don't want to deal with broken glass on top of it. So making sure that you have some sort of rack on the bottom so that the jars can sit on that. That way they aren't clanking around during the rolling boil process right over direct the heat source, and with the other jars in there, it kind of just keeps them a little bit more stable in position. This just sits at the bottom. The process and processing times and everything, it's going to be the same for the electric water bath canner as it would be for a traditional canner. Every step will be the same. Also need a large towel or some sort of folded towel on your countertop to put your jars onto after the canning process is done. The recipe that I'm going to be using, it's coming from this book I've had for a long time. It's the Ball Blue Book Guide to Preserving, and there's a lot of recipes in here that I enjoy using, and the pages are all destroyed by canning messes. Anyway, the recipe I'm using is the Vine Fresh Tomato Soup on page 35, and it shows the ingredients and all of the steps. And then a tip is vegetables may be omitted to suit your taste, but do not increase the measurement of vegetables or change the type of vegetables used in this recipe. And I firmly agree with that, especially if you are brand new to canning. So now let's talk about the ingredients. The recipe calls for 12 to 14 pounds of tomatoes. I have about 10-ish pounds because that's what I have that's ripe. I've got a bowl of cherry tomatoes that I've already washed, and a collection of different tomatoes here. I've got Roma's paste tomatoes, slicing tomatoes, just a collection here. So that's all set, ready to go. You also need 1 medium red bell pepper. I've got a couple bell peppers here. One was red, one was turning red. So I coarsely chopped that up. We've got 1 coarsely chopped yellow onion. The recipe says 2 cloves of minced garlic. I have 3 cloves of minced garlic. A 1/4 cup of tomato paste. That would probably be about half a can. I might use the whole one though, just because. We also will need some sugar, salt and pepper, and citric acid or bottled lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So with the recipe, they have like the little tips and stuff, and it says that, you know, you can leave ingredients out if you don't like the taste of it or whatever, but don't add additional vegetables. And that's mostly because it can throw off the acidity when you're water bath canning. Like, you don't really want to add cream to this recipe or chicken stock or anything like that. This is just mostly tomatoes, and then we're going to be adding citric acid to it, which makes it safe to water bath can. If you want to do the other traditional tomato soup recipes, then the process would be different when you're canning it. It may require a pressure canner, and the processing times would be a little bit different. So every recipe is going to require different processing steps. With that said, where you don't want to add additional vegetables, I'm probably going to end up using a whole can of the tomato paste because I didn't quite have the 12 to 14 pounds of tomatoes that were called for in this recipe. I have like just over or just around 10 pounds maybe, especially after I trimmed some of them and cut them up. I'm just gonna end up adding the whole can of tomato paste, but that's just me. If you are brand new to water bath canning, then I highly recommend following the steps exactly as they are written. And as you get more comfortable with the whole process and understanding how the shelf life works and what you're comfortable with, then you can kind of start playing around with recipes as you see fit. For the sake of these introduction to canning videos where I show beginner recipes for water bath canning and pressure canning, I usually follow the recipes as I get them because I feel like it's a good example of how you can make delicious things using either food that you get on sale from the store or food pantries or from your garden. Let's get started making the soup. All right, I've got a medium-sized stock pot here, and I'm gonna turn the burner on low. And we're gonna add a couple tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. And to that, I'm going to add our coarsely chopped yellow onion. The recipe says to add the onion, garlic, and olive oil and saute until the onion is translucent. I do not recommend adding the garlic right away because it can burn if left unattended at all, or if the oil gets really hot, and that would just make kind of a bitter taste, and you don't want that. So I tend to add the garlic towards the end. That way I don't have to worry about that. Alright, I just want to cook the onions until they're mostly translucent. And now I'm going to add the garlic. 3 cloves of minced garlic. The recipe calls for 2. But 2 of the cloves were a little small. We just want to cook that down a bit. Really keep an eye on it. Do not let that garlic burn. Now I'm going to add the coarsely chopped bell pepper. And I'm going to add the tomatoes. Bring the heat up slightly to a little less than medium and really let that the tomatoes start to cook down. The recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of tomato paste, which would be roughly half of the can. but I'm going to be adding the whole can only because I shorted some of the tomatoes needed for the recipe. And I'm also going to add a tablespoon of sugar. Now that it has liquefied quite a bit, I'm going to turn it up just a little bit more. So now that it's over medium heat, that way it can get up to a good boil. Once it starts to boil, I'm going to cover it, turn it down, and just let it simmer for a little while. Because we're making soup, I don't want all the water to evaporate out of it. So I'm going to cover it, turn the burner down to low, just let all of that simmer for a little while. I'm gonna cover these and let them cook down for about 30 minutes or so. Woo! We still got like 12 minutes of it cooking down. So far the color looks really nice. It's kind of a fall time orange with the yellow tomatoes and the red tomatoes. Got a few more minutes. Ooh, looks good. Oh, this looks really good. Alright, I'm gonna turn the burner off at this point because now I'm gonna be running everything through the food mill. Grab another small, very, very small stock pot. Alright, I think I'm gonna put this just so I have a little bit more space in the pot. Probably should have did this first, but I kind of wanted to see what the texture would look like just running it through the food mill. But I'm gonna go ahead and use the immersion blender. Alright, I am happy with that consistency. It's nice and creamy. Okay. I'm going to turn the heat back up and add a tablespoon of salt, and a teaspoon of black pepper. Now, I like to add basil and things like that to tomato soup, but I will wait to season it to taste when I use it, and then I can add like fresh basil or onion powder if it needs it. Right, we just need to bring this back up to a simmer. So at this point, we're ready to can up the soup, and I wanted to talk about heating up the jars. So I place my jars between the hot things and it gets them up to temperature. Like, these are really hot to the touch. A lot of people, most people, put their canning jars in the boiling water in the canner to get them up to temperature, so that you're not just putting a boiling hot liquid into an ice cold jar. So the jars need to be warmed up if you're putting hot things into them. And I find this method, because my jars are already clean and everything, just putting them around the canner or where I'm cooking warms them up really nicely. Now we need to add some extra acidity to the canning jars before we put the soup in. The recipe that I have is referring to a quart-size jar, and they say to add either 2 tablespoons of bottled lemon juice, and they use bottled lemon juice instead of fresh because bottled has a level acidity to it, so it's a 5% acidity, whereas if you were to juice your own lemon, the acidity can vary. I'm going to be using citric acid today, and for a quart-size jar it is a half of a teaspoon per jar. I'm using a pint-size jar, which is half of that, so I'm going to be using a 1/4 teaspoon. I really like these canning funnels so far. We need to leave a half of an inch of headspace in the jar. The headspace is the distance between the contents of the jar, so whatever is inside the jar, and the rim of the jar. And headspace varies depending on what you're canning. If you're canning jams, it's usually like a 1/4 inch headspace. If you're canning stews or like stocks or pressure canning things, sometimes it can be an inch of a headspace. It just depends on what you're canning. So you gotta make sure you read the recipe, and it will tell you how much air to leave inside the jar. We want to remove any air bubbles that are possibly in the soup. We do that by sticking the bubble tool in, just kind of bouncing it around a little bit, and then measuring for headspace. And on the bubble tool, it has the measurements on here. So a half of an inch can go up a little bit higher. To there. And you want to, if you add more liquid or take liquid away, you want to use your bubble tool again. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill all the rest of the jars. So I tried to make this stretch to 8 jars, but it was leaving too much of headspace in each one. And the thing with headspace is you don't want to overfill your jars because it can cause siphoning and it can prevent the lids from sealing. And you don't want to underfill your jars because it can limit shelf life. Alright, now I need to clean the rims because they are completely covered in soup. We do this so that the rims are completely clean. If there's any remnants of anything on the jar, whether it be dust or whatever it was that you were canning, it can prevent the lids from sealing. So you want to clean them off. Some people just do this with water. I prefer to do it with distilled white vinegar. So I just take a little distilled white vinegar on a lint-free cloth or a t-shirt rag or something that won't leave anything behind, and I go around and I clean the rim of each jar. And you know, I've been reusing canning jars for a while now, and I should get into a better habit of checking the rims of the jars before I even start canning, because if there's any cracks or defects in the rim, then that can also prevent the lid from sealing. So because I didn't do that earlier, I'm gonna do it now as I clean each of the rims. are clean, and I've got the lids here. I need 7. And we're just going to center the lids onto the jars. Grab a ring or a band, and then we need to put the band on the jar finger tight. And finger tight means the tips of our fingers around the band and finger tight. So you don't want to crank down on it because that can prevent it from sealing, and you don't want it too loose because that can also prevent it from sealing. So you just do lightly, just as strong as your fingertips can go, kind of, without going, unless you have extremely strong fingertips. But that's how that one looks, and we'll do the rest of them. Turn up the water bath canner to the canning position, or if you're using a stovetop, turn the burner up so that your water can continue to get hot. And with your canning rack at the bottom, we're going to put one jar, one at a time, in the canner. In traditional water bath canning here, we would need about an inch of water over the tops of the jars. I can visually see that I have at least an inch of water over the top, but if you're not sure, you can use your bubble tool because it goes all the way up to an inch, and just stick it in and put it in the water and make sure that your water is covering your jars by at least an inch. For steam canning, it's different. Pressure canning, it's different. And I know some people think that putting water over the tops of the jars can cause siphoning. I haven't had that experience. The only time I've had experience with siphoning so far, unless I experience it today, is when I pressure can. I have experienced siphoning, but water bath canning, basic recipes like this, I don't usually have an issue with that. Then I put the lid on. And then I have the 2 vent holes here on the lid pointed towards our vent hood. Now we're gonna wait for it to get up to a rolling boil before we start the timer. All right, so we have a little bit left over here. I'm gonna taste test it. I don't expect much because there's no like aromatics in it as far as basil or anything like that. I want to try it just as it is. Got a little bread here I made the other day. It's good. It needs a little something though. Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's a lot better with fresh basil in it. It definitely needs a little more like herbs added to it, but it is really good. And for a basic tomato soup that you can water bath can, it's pretty good. Still waiting for the water to get to a rolling boil, and I just started dinner. We'll be back. All right, the water bath canner is at a rolling boil. So now we're gonna set the processing time. They don't give me a processing time for pint-sized jars for this recipe. It's usually 5 minutes less than the quart size for pint size. So they say that it's 40 minutes for quart size. I'm going to just do the 40 minutes for the pint size and it'll be okay. All right, these have been in there for 40 minutes. So we're gonna turn the burner off and then take the lid off so that the steam is directed away from your face and towards whatever ventilation you have. And we're gonna let these sit here for about 5 minutes and let them cool off slightly. If you have one of the canners with the canning rack that lifts out, you can do that at this point. You don't want to set your hot canning jars right onto your cool countertop because the extreme change in temperature can cause the jars to crack. So if you fold the towel in half or more, it just gives a nice barrier between the jars and the counter. It's been about 5 minutes, I think. I don't know. One at a time. We lift the jars out. And move them to the towel. So the jars came out pretty good. I'm happy with that. The seals have mostly popped down. Maybe a couple I'm still waiting on. But the next step is those are gonna sit on the counter for at least a day. And then I will check all the seals, make sure all the buttons went down. And then I will remove the bands, do a seal test where I just kind of grab the jar by the lid, make sure it's on there, flip it upside down, make sure that it's all good. And then we store them in the pantry that way, in a dark, cool pantry that doesn't get direct heat or anything. We leave the bands off because if you were to leave the bands on while you stored them, it is possible that the jar didn't seal properly or that the seal can become undone and it would reseal itself based on, like, let's say like some of the sauce or whatever got inside the jar rim and it was able to like reseal itself because it dried up. And it can have a false sealing effect where you won't be able to tell that the jar lid is no longer on it or that it was, you know, not sealed properly to begin with. So just by removing the bands, you're able to see. That is one of the first ways to detect if the canned item is safe to eat or not. And by having the band on there, it hinders that step a little bit. So most of us just take the bands off and then you don't have to worry about that too much. The next thing is that they can sit on the pantry for up to a year, and that is just up to your discretion. Full disclosure here, I have stuff that has sat on the pantry for upwards of 1.5 years to almost 2 years and it's been fine. I just check the lid, I pop it. Usually it's pickled things. If it smells bad, if you see mold, anything that is questionable, just throw it away. It's not worth getting sick over. But the guidelines is up to 1 year for properly home canned foods. I'm very excited to have 7 jars of homemade tomato soup in our pantry. It will get used. I'm very, very excited for it. I didn't do the quart size ones because a lot of the times it's either myself or my oldest eating tomato soup. There are really good tomato soup recipes out there. Most of the time they require pressure canning because they'll either have a chicken broth base or something, and I did want to originally do that. I have chicken stock in my pantry that I'd like to use up, but I'm kind of in a hurry this week, so I just really wanted to get this put up in our pantry, and I'm happy to just have a basic tomato soup that I can doctor up once I reheat it. Alright, so that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you so much for joining me today while I canned up some tomato soup, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!